You've been here before. You can feel it, that strange, unsettling sensation crawling up your spine when something doesn't quite add up. The texts that come in waves. The weekends that suddenly go dark. The way they always seem just close enough to keep you hoping, but just far enough to keep you guessing. You tell yourself you're overthinking it. You replay the good moments like a highlight reel, convincing yourself that what you felt was real, that what they showed you was the whole picture. But somewhere deep in your gut, and you already know this, something is off, not slightly off, fundamentally off. The kind of off that makes you stare at your ceiling at 2 a.m. running mental calculations on someone who probably isn't losing a single minute of sleep over you. And that's the part that hurts the most, isn't it? Not just the possibility of betrayal, but the realization that while you were investing everything, they were managing a portfolio. Welcome to the psychology of the avoidant. Partner who keeps multiple people on rotation, and by the time this is over, you will never unsee what I'm about to show you. Here's what most people get devastatingly wrong about avoidance. They assume the behavior is about attraction. They think if he or she was really into me, they'd be consistent. They'd show up. They would choose. And that assumption, as logical as it sounds, is precisely what keeps millions of people trapped in situationships, almost relationships, and emotional waiting rooms for years at a time. Because the truth is, for a dismissive avoidant who runs multiple connections simultaneously, attraction has almost nothing to do with it. In fact, the more attracted they are to you, the more dangerous you become to them, and the more aggressively they will manage that danger by diluting their emotional exposure across multiple people. This is not a dating strategy. This is a psychological defense system built in childhood, reinforced by every relationship they've had, and executed with a level of unconscious precision that would genuinely disturb you if you could see it from the outside. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. We are going to step outside the emotional fog you've been living in and look at this clearly, clinically, and completely. But before we get into the 5 signs, I need to tell you something that most relationship content will never say out loud. The avoidant who keeps multiple partners on rotation is not doing it because they are evil. They are not doing it because you are not enough. They are doing it because they are terrified. Terrified of need. Terrified of dependence. Terrified that if they give one person full access to who they really are, that person will either consume them, control them, or leave, and they will be destroyed. So instead of risking that, they build a system. A quiet, carefully maintained architecture of emotional distance disguised as independence, mysterious charm, and just enough. Warmth to keep everyone exactly where they need them to be. They don't write this system down. They don't consciously plan it over coffee on a Sunday morning. It emerges from the deepest, most defended parts of their psychology, and it runs almost entirely on autopilot. And here's the cliffhanger I need to leave you with right now, because this is the part that changes everything. One of the 5 signs I'm about to reveal is something the avoidant themselves does not know they're doing. Not consciously, not deliberately. They would pass a lie detector test. And it's the one sign that once you recognize it will make every confusing thing this person has ever done suddenly make terrifying sense. Keep watching. Let's begin with the first sign, and I want you to pay very close attention here because this one hides in plain sight. It's called emotional rationing, and it is the foundational behavior of every avoidant who is managing multiple connections. Emotional rationing is the practice. Ice always unconscious. Always consistent of never giving any single person more than a carefully measured amount of emotional presence at one time. You know what this looks like in real life. You have a conversation with them that is so deep, so connected, so breathtakingly intimate that you go home thinking, this is it. This is real. This person sees me in a way nobody ever has. And then they go quiet. Not cold exactly, just gone. Unavailable. Occupied by life, work, themselves, whatever explanation they offer. And you wait, and you wonder. And eventually they come back and the warmth returns and you tell yourself the distance was just circumstance. But here's what was actually happening during that silence. They were present with someone else, not necessarily romantically, not necessarily physically, but emotionally. Because the avoidant who rotates partners understands at a cellular level that emotional intensity with any one person is a threat, so they regulate it. They give you depth on Monday and disappear by Wednesday. They give someone else attention on Thursday and pull back by Saturday. The rotation isn't always about sex or romance. Often, it's about emotional load balancing, distributing their intimacy so thinly across multiple people that no single person ever accumulates enough of them to constitute a real relationship. And the maddening, heartbreaking genius of it is that each person in the rotation feels special during their window. Each person has evidence, real evidence, that the connection is genuine, because it is genuine. In the moment, they mean everything they say. They feel everything they seem to feel. They are just incapable of sustaining it with one person, so they outsource the overflow to others, and everyone gets a fraction of something that feels whole. Notice how you feel when they go quiet after an intense conversation. Notice the specific flavor of that silence. It's not the silence of someone who has pulled away. AWS, they don't care. It has a strange quality to it, almost like held breath, like something is being managed. That feeling you have is not anxiety. It is perception. Your nervous system is picking up on something your conscious mind has been trained to dismiss. And what it's picking up on is the deliberate, though, unconscious withdrawal of emotional presence to prevent overexposure. The avoidant does not think, I must ration my feelings for this person to maintain the rotation. They think, I need some space. I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. This is moving too fast. And every one of those thoughts is true for them, but what they don't understand, and what you now need to understand, is that the trigger for that overwhelm is connection itself. Not too much connection, just connection. Real, threatening, genuine connection that has the potential to create dependence. And dependence, for the avoidant, is the most dangerous thing in the world. The second sign is something I call the availability algorithm, and once you understand it, you will stop interpreting inconsistency as passion and start seeing it for what it is, a management system. The avoidant who runs multiple partners does not have a random or chaotic schedule of contact. It only appears random. In reality, their availability follows a deeply consistent internal logic that has everything to do with emotional threat levels and almost nothing to do with their actual calendar. Here's how it works. When you are emotionally regulated, meaning you seem fine, you're not leaning in too hard. You're showing signs of independence. Maybe you've been a little less available yourself, they move toward you. When you start to need more, when your messages get slightly more frequent, when your emotional investment becomes visible, when you express anything that sounds like want or expectation, they pull back. This is not coincidence. This is not bad timing. This is the algorithm running exactly as designed. The F. Function of this algorithm is to maintain every person in the rotation at a specific emotional temperature. Warm enough to stay, cool enough not to demand. And the way they keep everyone at that temperature is by using their own availability as a thermostat. They appear when you cool down. They disappear when you heat up. And if you're sitting there thinking that's exactly what happens with us, I need you to stay with that recognition, because we are not done yet. What makes this sign so psychologically devastating is that it can be mistaken almost perfectly for the push-pull dynamic of early attraction. We are biologically wired to find inconsistency more compelling than consistency. Variable reward schedules, the same mechanism behind slot machines, are the most powerful behavioral reinforcers ever documented in psychology. When someone is unpredictably available, our brains do not register that as a red flag. They register it as a chase. They release dopamine in anticipation of the next hit of connection. And the avoidant, without knowing any of this neuroscience, has stumbled into one of the most effective emotional retention systems in existence. They are not playing games, but the effect is identical to someone who is, and you are not weak or foolish for being affected by it. You are human. You are responding exactly the way your nervous system was designed to respond to intermittent connection, with increasing investment, increasing hope, and a growing inability to simply walk away. Now we arrive at the third sign, and this is the one I told you about, the one that the avoidant does not consciously know they're doing. This is the one that will reorganize your entire understanding of every confusing moment you've had with this person. I call it parallel intimacy maintenance, and it is perhaps the most psychologically sophisticated and most emotionally costly behavior on this list. Parallel intimacy maintenance is the simultaneous cultivation of deep emotional bonds across multiple people in a way that feels exclusive to each individual, but is structurally designed to ensure that no single bond ever reaches the threshold of true commitment. Let me translate that into something you can feel. The avoidant in your life has probably told you things about their childhood, their fears, their failed relationships, the ways they've been hurt. They've shared vulnerably. They've been real with you in moments that felt like sacred ground. And you have held those moments as evidence. Evidence that you are different, that what you have is different, that they don't open up like this with just anyone. And here's the thing that is going to sit uncomfortably with you for a moment. They weren't lying. They do open up like that. but not just with you. They open up like that with each person in the rotation, not identically, but proportionally. Each person gets a version of the real them, calibrated, curated, enough to create genuine bond, number, T enough to create genuine entrapment. The reason they don't know they're doing this is because in each moment, the vulnerability is real. The avoidant is not performing intimacy. They are experiencing it briefly, safely, in controlled doses distributed across enough people that none of them can accumulate the critical mass of knowing them that would force a real decision. They get the relief of being seen without the risk of being known. And the people in the rotation get the experience of intimacy without ever quite getting the relationship they thought they were building toward. Think about the conversations you've had with this person that felt like you were finally breaking through. The late night phone calls where they said something that felt like it came from somewhere they rarely go. The moments of unexpected softness that made you recalibrate everything. Those moments were real. But they were also, and this is the part that requires real psychological courage to accept distributed. Not cheapened by that distribution, but not exclusive to you either. And when you understand this, something else becomes clear. The reason they can never quite commit, can never quite make it official, can never quite move the relationship from ambiguous to defined is not because they haven't decided yet. It's because defining the relationship with you would require discontinuing it with everyone else. And discontinuing it with everyone else would mean relying on you alone. And relying on you alone is the one thing their entire psychological architecture was built to prevent. The fourth sign is what psychologists who study attachment call deactivating strategies, but I want to talk about them in the context of rotation maintenance because when you see them in that context, they reveal something much more calculated feeling than they actually are. Deactivating strategies are the specific behaviors and avoidant uses to turn down the emotional intensity of a connection, and it starts to feel like too much. You've probably experienced every single one of these and explained them away. They suddenly find faults in you that weren't mentioned before, small criticisms that emerge precisely when the relationship was at its warmest. They bring up their ex in a context that feels oddly placed, not with longing necessarily, but in a way that subtly reintroduces distance. They become intellectually rather than emotionally engaged, analyzing the relationship, theorizing about connection, discussing attachment styles with a clinical detachment that makes you feel like a case study rather than a partner. They get extremely busy at the exact moment you were expecting more. They introduce a new friendship or project that seems to absorb the energy they were directing at you. None of these feel in isolation like evidence of rotation. They feel like mood, stress, normal relationship rhythms. And that's exactly why they work. Each deactivating strategy is plausibly deniable. Each one can be explained by real-world circumstances, and while you are busy giving them the benefit of the doubt that was precisely engineered into their behavior, the temperature drops back down to the level they need it at, and the rotation continues undisturbed. Here is what you need to understand about these strategies in the specific context of multiple partners. Every person in the rotation experiences deactivation, but no one experiences it in the same way at the same time. Because the avoidant is managing multiple emotional temperatures simultaneously, their deactivation of you often coincides with their activation towards someone else. This means that while you are sitting in the confusion of their sudden distance, wondering what you did wrong, trying to figure out what changed, they are being remarkably present with someone else. Not because they prefer that person to you, but because that person's emotional temperature has dropped to a level that February, the manageable, while yours has risen to a level that doesn't. This is the rotation in its most active, most painful form. And from inside it, it is nearly impossible to see. Because you only have access to your own experience. You don't see the rest of the board. You only see your square. The fifth and final sign is the one that perhaps requires the most from you to accept, because it implicates not just them, but the dynamic itself and your own role within it. I call it the intimacy ceiling, and it is the invisible but absolutely real upper limit on how deep, how close, how committed any connection with this person can become. Every avoidant has one. The intimacy ceiling is not a decision. It is not a rule they set. It is a structural feature of their attachment system, a point beyond which their psychological defenses activate so forcefully that forward movement becomes genuinely impossible for them. No amount of patience, understanding, or love on your part can raise that ceiling. Not because you aren't enough, But because the ceiling was installed before they ever met you installed in early relationships, early experiences of abandonment or enmeshment or inconsistency that taught them at the most fundamental level that needing someone is dangerous and being needed is suffocating. When you encounter the intimacy ceiling in real life, it feels like this. Things are going incredibly well. There is genuine momentum. The connection deepens and deepens, and you can feel that you are approaching something, a threshold, a step, a crossing into something real and defined and mutual. And then, without warning, without fight, without obvious reason, it stops. Not dramatically. They don't leave. They don't confess to anything. They just plateau. They become subtly less present. The future talk fades. The warmth remains, but the progress disappears. And you wait for the next step that never comes. What you are experiencing at that moment is the ceiling. You have at the maximum altitude this relationship is structurally permitted to reach. And here is the devastating component of how this connects to the rotation. The ceiling is part of what makes the rotation necessary. Because the avoidant cannot go deeper with you, not because they don't want to, not because they don't feel something real, but because their nervous system simply will not permit it. The anxiety that depth creates becomes unbearable. But they also cannot fully let you go. Because some part of them genuinely wants connection, genuinely feels drawn to you, genuinely does not want to lose what you have. So instead of going deeper or letting go, they go wide. They maintain the connection with you at the highest level their system can tolerate, and they dilute the emotional pressure by distributing it across others. The rotation is not the avoidant being greedy. It is the avoidant trying to solve an unsolvable equation: how to have connection without risk, intimacy without exposure. Your love without dependence. And the people in the rotation pay the price for a problem they did not create and were never equipped to solve. Now I want to talk to you about something that most videos on this subject never address: what happens to you inside this dynamic, because the psychological impact on the person who loves an avoidant rotator is real, lasting, and deeply underestimated. Being on a rotation, even without knowing you're on one, does specific things to your psychology. It creates hypervigilance. You become finely tuned to their mood, their energy, the timing of their messages, the tone of their words. You start reading subtext obsessively because the text alone never gives you enough information to feel secure. You develop what psychologists call an anxious attachment activation, a state of low-grade but persistent alarm that trains your nervous system to treat their presence as relief and their absence as threat. Over time, this rewires you. You start to need tea. Air validation, not because you are needy by nature, but because the inconsistency of their availability has made their approval the only thing that can quiet the alarm. And once you are wired that way, you are no longer reacting to them, you are reacting to the system. The rotation doesn't just manage them, it reshapes you. It turns emotionally stable, independent, self-aware people into people they barely recognize. People who check their phone 40 times in an evening. People who rehearse conversations. People who shrink and wait and hope and talk themselves out of their own perceptions because the alternative that this person they care about is keeping them in a carefully managed holding pattern alongside others is too painful to hold for long. And that's the part I most need you to hear. The confusion you feel is not a character flaw. The self-doubt is not evidence of weakness. The anxiety is not proof that you're too much. These are the entirely predictable psychological consequences of being inside a system that was designed, however, unconsciously to keep you uncertain. Uncertainty is the mechanism. Your confusion is not a bug. It is the feature. Because a person who is confused is a person who stays. A person who is trying to figure it out is a person who doesn't leave. And an avoidant's deepest, most primal fear abandonment is quieted every single time the people in their rotation choose to stay and wait rather than walk away. So in the most painful irony of this entire dynamic, your loyalty is the very thing that sustains the system that hurts you. So what do you do with all of this? Because information without direction is just pain with better vocabulary. The first thing you do is stop trying to fix the avoidant. Not because they are unfixable, people do grow. Attachment styles do evolve. Therapy and genuine self-work can change even the most entrenched defensive patterns. But because fixing them is not your job, and more importantly, it is not within your power. The intimacy ceiling cannot be raised from the outside. The rotation cannot be ended by making yourself more appealing, more available, more understanding, more patient. Every attempt to earn your way past their defenses simply proves to their nervous system that the defenses are working, that they can continue to be emotionally unavailable, and people will continue to wait. Your patience, misapplied, is not love. It is fuel. The second thing you do, and this is where real psychological power lives, is turn your extraordinary capacity for perception back on yourself. You have been using your emotional intelligence to decode them, to understand their patterns, their triggers, their history. You have probably developed a more sophisticated understanding of their attachment wounds than most therapists would generate in 6 sessions. And while you have been studying them, you have been neglecting the more important question. Why are you here? Not as an accuser, as a genuine, open-hearted, non-judgmental inquiry. What is it in your own history that makes the uncertain, the unavailable, the almost but not quite feel more compelling than the safe and the certain? Because for most people who find themselves repeatedly in this kind of dynamic, there is a familiar flavor to it, an echo of something older, a blueprint laid down long before this person entered the picture. And that blueprint, not their avoidance, is where you're actually people who break this pattern permanently are not the ones who find the right avoidant to finally heal. They are the ones who get honest enough with themselves to see that the attraction to unavailability is a symptom of their own unresolved relationship with love. They do the work, real work, not Instagram affirmations, to understand where they learned that love looks like longing, where they decided that having to earn someone's consistency meant the connection was worth more, where they began to see unfused anxiety for passion and stability for boredom. And when that work is done not perfectly, not permanently, but substantially, the rotation loses its pull. Not because avoidants change, because you do. I'll leave you with this. The avoidant who runs a rotation is not a villain in your story. They are a deeply wounded person executing a deeply effective survival strategy, surrounded by people who care about them, unable to receive any of it fully, living in a kind of emotional poverty that their own behavior guarantees they will never escape. There is something genuinely tragic about that. You can have compassion for it. But compassion does not require you to remain the solution to a problem that was never yours to solve. You deserve someone whose availability does not require decoding. Someone whose warmth does not come with a hidden expiration date. Someone who chooses you not because you have learned to make yourself the perfect emotional temperature, but because showing up for or you is something they want to do completely, consistently, and without a rotation running quietly in the background. The moment you truly believe you deserve that, not as an idea, but as an embodied, non-negotiable standard, is the moment this dynamic loses its power over you forever. And no avoidant, no matter how magnetic, how wounded, how real their moments of connection felt, will be able to pull you back into the waiting room. So here's my question for you, and I genuinely want to know, because the comments on this are always the most revealing thing. When you look back at the relationship that brought you to a video like this, what was the very first moment, the very first small sign that something was off? Not when you admitted it to yourself. The first moment you actually felt it, before your mind found an explanation. Tell me in the comments. Because that moment, the one you talked yourself out of, is where your answer has been living all along.